Hi, my name is Rebecca Teeter. I am a coach, but I'm also an intuitive reader of the energy field. So when I work with people, I really enjoy working with people who have some form of calling that they're bringing out into the world, but they feel hesitant about doing so. And often those people are creative, they might be healers, and they might also be readers or even just people with a magical calling. So today I really wanted to take a moment and talk to you a little bit about reading. And as I do that, I'm going to talk about some of the different tools that I've played with over the years. And then I want to transition that into how I do readings now, where I don't use tools, and to kind of show some of the similarities. And I might talk just a little bit about symbolism and how that's used. So to start with, I think just about everybody probably has seen, because there are so many different versions of these out in the world, but of course, tarot cards. This was probably the first tool that I used to start interacting with my intuition and to give readings. Tarot cards are really fabulous way to start getting into looking at yourself from a different perspective. And also, they can be a great tool to work with other people because it takes just a little bit of the emphasis off of the person being read as it's projected a bit into the cards. So tarot cards, especially in the traditional deck, they usually are devised of two parts. One is the major arcana, and I'm showing you this because this is a major arcana only deck. It's one of my early ones and one of my most treasured ones as well. And you can see just by comparing them that clearly there's a different number of cards in the deck. So the major arcana really tells the story of the hero's journey, and the hero's journey is universal because we all are heroes in our own story. And so this can tell you a lot about where you might be on your path, what's coming up next, what kind of wisdom, what kind of lessons are there for you. When it comes to the full deck, of course, there's the major arcana, and then there are also 4 suits of cards. And I don't necessarily want to talk about reading with tarot cards, but what I do want to talk about is the fact that when you use tarot cards to read, one of the really wonderful things about it is that there is such a strong history, and you can lean into that history and the meaning of what the cards are traditionally in order to form your own practice. Now, if you're like me and you're really intuitive, at some point you might break the mold on that. So while I do study what the traditional meanings are, to be honest with you, when I read intuitively, I will just let the cards speak to me. So I might pull a card out and there might be an element on the card that just, I don't know, it shines a little bit, it stands out, it draws my attention, and that's where my reading will start. So my traditional meanings might come up because that's what might get triggered, but it might be something entirely different. So when I look for cards that speak to me, I'm usually looking for cards that are really visual with a lot of images on them. However, that part of the tarot deck that has suits, well, we have playing cards. So you can do readings with just playing cards if you can memorize what the suits mean and what the numbers mean. Another way that people do readings, usually more simple readings, is with something like this. And these are kind of decorative, but they're dice. So you can do a pretty simple reading just by rolling some dice and looking at the numbers. And so if you know numerology, that's really helpful for doing dice reading. But you can also just look online and you'll find little charts that say what the numbers mean. That leads me into another divination form. And of course, there's tons and tons of ways that people do readings and lots of different elements that come in. But here's another way, which is reading cowrie shells. So these are 4 cowrie shells, and similar to the dice, these are for really simple reads. I think usually yes and no answers with these, although mine are painted to indicate elements. So I can do a little bit more with these, but there's kind of a secret about that I'll get into in a bit. Anyhow, Of course, when the cowrie shells land, they either land face up or face down. And depending on how many land in what direction, it tells you the meaning. And since I'm not teaching you how to read, I'm not going into those, but just know that that's one of the ways. And numbers can even be important in tarot card decks. And that's good to know because, of course, in the court cards and even in the major arcana, they are numbered. And that can tell you a little bit about where you might be in the journey. So like if you get a card that's in the low numbers, like 1 or 2, you might be somewhere in the beginning of a journey. And if you're a little higher, it might be somewhere towards the end. Back to cards just a little bit, because I forgot to mention that, of course, there are traditional tarot cards, but there are also a lot of other kinds. There are oracle cards, or these are actually they're called the Philosopher's Stone deck. Again, another one of my very heart-centered decks that I love. In this suit of cards, there's only 40 cards total, so it's less than a tarot deck, but more than a major arcana deck. And in this, there are these wonderful images of stone beings, and you'll get a word and again a number. And of course, those numbers 1 through 40 will indicate where you might be on the path. But to read something like this, I really have to lean into my intuition quite a bit, because you're not going to find the depth of information that you will find for your basic tarot cards to lean on. So it's really nice when you have something and you're learning and you can lean into the tradition. There's sort of in addition to the information that comes out when you have history of people reading one card in the same way for a long time. So you don't just have to pull out from yourself. If you are more of an intuitive reader, though, I will say that one of the things that's really helped me as an intuitive reader was to study art. So now I want to get into a couple of other sets of divination tools that I have. And there's some similarities and there's some differences to them. So the first set that I want to mention is this. So what I have in here is a set of what is called bones. And these bones are from the Zulu tradition. And I will tell you that my bone set that I have here was part of a beginner's course that I took. A lot of people who read bones are traditional healers. In the Zulu tradition, they're called Sangoma. I've had several Sangoma readings. I actually know a few Sangomas, and I find this style very interesting, but I want to differentiate that I'm not a Sangoma. I'm not initiated into those traditions. I got this particular set from a very beginner's course that I took from a Sangoma. And I want to talk about how these are called bones. And look, you'll see there's a dice right there. So that's where one of those things I showed earlier shows up again. That's that little trick that I wanted to share. And these are kind of hard for me to hold up, but the cowrie shells that I have are also a part of this set. So this course that I took was from a Sangoma. It's a beginner's course, and the person that I learned from, she does have more in-depth courses, which I have not taken. So this is a beginner set, and as I said, these are called bones, and you can look into my set here and see that I have some antlers. A full set of bones usually has a lot more animal bones in it, but you might find teeth, shells. This is actually a domino. I felt kind of special when I got the one that doesn't have numbers on it, I will admit. Not that it necessarily means that. But they'll also have little trinkets. Here's a key, a mirror, coins. So all of these little elements that go into this set represent something. And so, of course, when I took this course, the person who provided it also provided ideas about what these things might mean. But really, what makes these sets, my next set is actually a different tradition. I'm not going to say which one it is, but it's a different tradition, but it's also a bone set. And you will see there are some bones Again, not that many. Most of mine are more trinkets. And there are some things in here that are really valuable and important to me personally because they were all gifted to me. This one has kind of a special meaning. You'll also find nuts, seeds, all different kinds of things in here, and each thing means something different. And what's really interesting about when these are done and the way that these are done is they're usually picked up. When I read with this, I often will pick up the entire little basket and toss it onto the mat. With the other set, I reach into the bag and pull them out, and I'll toss them onto the mat. And you have to start to look at where things land on the mat and how they land together. So one of my favorite illustrations for that is I have a few things in this one set like this, which is a bottle cap with a little message on it. And sometimes something might just land up in the cap, and that will give it a different meaning, or it will give it a different relationship. As well, when looking at the map, different readers will read differently. So some will look for specific items that might represent the querent or the person asking the question, and they'll read out from there. And others might look to the center of the map as the central story that's happening. And I just mentioned one of my favorite words, because really when we're doing any kind of reading, that's what we're doing. We're bringing a different story or a different perspective into the struggles or the challenges that we might be facing in life. I really adore and love the statement that the pickle can't see the jar that it's in. And I think that's true for all of us. We all have issues in our lives where we just can't quite see the behavior that we have that's holding us back, or we just can't quite get the bigger picture and understand the greater wisdom that might be there for us. And for me, that's where readings can have a real value. So the thing that's different about these last two sets that I did want to point out, and then I segued away from for a moment, when you do a tarot reading, people have a lot of different ideas about what is happening. So there are people in this camp that say, you use the traditional meanings of the cards, and they're just a tool, and we're just, using them as a tool, and they don't align as well with the idea that we're working with energy or working with the unseen. And then there are others who believe differently. So you'll find a lot of different foundational thoughts in that work. When it comes to bones readings, from the traditions that I've looked into or been introduced into to some degree, the difference is with a bones reading that when the bones are thrown, it's our ancestors that we have opened the doorway to who come and place the bones on the mat where they need to be. There's a lot more intention and ritual that is inherent in doing any kinds of bones reading. I do have ritual that I do around a tarot reading, but it's just different. And that thought process is different. That bones readings generally mean you're interacting with your ancestors, those who have walked the earth before you. That might be a whole other topic. So, what is interesting is that interplay that I talked about with the bones readings. That occurs in tarot as well. There are different ways to interpret cards, and of course there are those traditional meanings, and cards can be upright, and they have one meaning, and then you will find some people read what is called reversals. Some people don't. Reversal is simply a card that shows up upside down. For some people, they will read a reversal as in that means a reversal of the meaning. It's not the way that I read it. In doing some research, I have discovered that people do that very differently. So for me, when there is a reversal, it means simply that that energy is either coming or going. And most commonly, it involves some form of prescription, meaning that there's something about that card, something about the energy of that card, or the psychological meanings that might show up with it that is something that you can bring into your life in order to get through whatever obstacle that you're facing. And for me, because I'm intuitive, how it shows up in my own knowing, we'll say. So let me segue that now into how do I do readings if I don't have tools? And this work has really become my most favorite way to do a reading, because what I use is simply my intuition. So we all have different languages that we use to interact with our intuition. So for some of us, we actually see things or we see pictures in our heads. For some of us, we might hear noises or sounds or possibly even words. Others, it's very common to be very empathic and to feel emotions. For me, I feel textures, and those textures have meanings or weights. So I will start a reading by using a common symbol, and that symbol is the symbol of a rose. And what I'll do is I'll go into a particular state within my own energy field and my own being where I become very centered, and I get centered and clear, and I go into a deep state of relaxation where I can actually tap in differently. And then I'll connect with the person that I'm reading, and I'll invite that part of them that is working through whatever question they have, whatever issue, or sometimes just whatever energy chooses to show up. And I'll invite that energy to populate the rose that I have in front of me, that I can see and sense and feel. And then I'll start to read different elements of that rose, and different places on the rose will relate to different elements of the spirit or the energy that I'm reading. And that's how the story will unfold. So, different tools, different ways of doing it. I like to be able to have tools sometimes, to have something in the physical world that just seems a little bit more real or weighty. But my go-to is to trust my own intuition and my own knowing and my own story. And that I do without tools. So that's how the majority of my readings are. And I do readings for clients. So I have that as an offering on my website. And really that's it. Aside from using the rose, I also will just call up symbols. And I actually meant to have one here today, and I don't think I have any in the house. But I will share that one of my favorite symbols to work with is the banana. And there's a story behind that. You see, we see the symbol or we see the picture, or sometimes for some people it's a movie, and it doesn't always have the meaning that we think it will have. And so the story of the banana is a particularly favorite one of mine, because I was really stuck doing a reading one time, and I was still in a learning process, and I went through almost a year-long program learning how to really connect in, develop my intuition, learn how to talk to that part of myself that is intuitive, and to be able to interpret those symbols. And I was actually sitting in class, and it was the first time nothing was coming. Everything was black, and I just couldn't figure out what to do. And I heard my teacher say, "If you knew what it was, what would it be?" And I said, "It's a banana." What the heck? What does that tell me about someone or give them information? And she said, "What's the meaning?" Because that's what we do. Here's the symbol, here's the meaning. "What's the meaning, Rebecca?" And I said, "It's your father." And I went on to describe these elements of this man that I knew was there. And the woman recognized him, because everything symbolically related to who she knew him to be. So I've come to learn that when I see a banana in a reading, there's this dual message there. It's whatever the person needs to hear about. And it's also a reminder to me as the reader to not take myself so seriously. Because when you start to take yourself really seriously and you start to you start to shut down your power center. And what happens is everything gets way more difficult. So I think that's enough for today, even though I could talk about this for hours. And I have stories in every one of these elements and pieces that I shared with you today, and ones that I forgot to bring. So if you're curious and you want to know more, of course, you can go to my website at www.rebeccateeter.com and see what I have going on there. I do have a little email opt-in, a little free program that you can sign up for if you share your email address with me. And what's cool about it is it actually works with symbols too, so you can get like a little bit of an idea of what is it like to go inside and get information and bring it out into the world. Thank you for watching.